So I've been seeing this tweet and the discourse around it going around on Twitter, and it's a little concerning. So for people who are into video games but don't actually make them, I want to explain why this question is kind of dumb. So all a game engine is a tool to make video games. There's nothing really inherently special or different about them than the other ones. It's like comparing Google Docs to Microsoft Word. They're both different in their UIs and eccentricities, but at the end of the day, you make documents with them. Same thing with game engines. They all essentially do the same thing. It's kind of like comparing something like Photoshop versus Corel Painter versus Paint Shop Pro versus, I don't know, whatever the kids use these days. They all do the same thing. They all have different ways of going about it, but at the end of the day, none of them stop you from creating whatever you want to create. It's your vision that governs what the game engine can do, not the limitations or the tools within the engine itself. Now, yes, there are certain game engines that are better and worse at certain things. Like, for example, Scratch is a really simple to use game engine, but it can only do 2D games, while something like Unreal Engine 5 can do basically whatever you want. The same way that MS Paint is a really simple image editor, but can only do a certain amount of things, whereas Adobe Photoshop can do whatever you want. We definitely see certain kinds of games gravitate to certain kinds of game engines because those engines have tools that benefit that style of game. Unreal Engine was created by Epic Games to make Unreal Tournament, so for shooters, it has a lot of legacy there and makes sense to make those kinds of games, but it can't just make those kinds of games, it could make 2D games. Unity has a bad rep for being an asset flipper, but it also made Hollow Knight and Superhot and lots of other very popular games. Basically, if you go to work and you work in Microsoft Excel, but you prefer Google Docs, it's essentially the same thing as, working in Unity, but preferring Unreal Engine 4. At the end of the day, they're just tools to facilitate the work you're trying to do. There's nothing inherently superior or inferior about any of them. And just as a quick aside, the Havok engine is a physics piece of middleware. It's not a game engine in and of itself. Breath of the Wild is using it as a middleware, but it's not the engine it's running on. They have their own proprietary stuff they use over at Nintendo.